Lisa Montgomery is a mother of 4, a grandmother to 12, a lover of knitting, and a sister. She's also the only woman on death row, and she's set to become the first woman executed by the feds in nearly 70 years.
She was my baby sister. I took care of her. I loved her. I cherished her. I fed her. I clothed her. And then when the abuse started, I started protecting her.
That's Diane Mattingly, Montgomery's half-sister and one of the only witnesses to the early years of what would become Montgomery's whole childhood, being raped by her stepfather, Jack, and pimped out by her mother, Judy.
Judy, as a mother, failed her. She told Lisa, you have to earn your keep, so you have to have sex with these men. And then the school system, I feel, failed her. Everybody there that has testified afterwards said, well, they saw something wrong. Okay, then why didn't you speak up? Why didn't you report this? The police officer that Lisa went to and said, I'm being gang raped, drove her to her house, dropped her off, and left, and never reported it. He failed her. If one of those people would have stepped up and helped her, we wouldn't be here today. You wouldn't know Lisa's name.
Mattingly, who was also abused by Montgomery's mother, was 8, and Montgomery was 4 when Child Protective Services finally removed Mattingly from the home.
I thought, they know what's going on. They're coming in. They're going to save us. We're going to be fine. I couldn't understand why I was being taken out of the home and Lisa was being left behind. I thought they knew about the rape. I thought they knew about the beatings. I thought they knew about the torture that Judy was inflicting.
More than 30 years later, after several failed search attempts by both sisters, Mattingly finally found Montgomery again in Missouri, specifically in a Kansas City federal court, charged with murder. But anti-death penalty critics, Montgomery's lawyers, and Mattingly all say that the years of abuse weakened Montgomery's mental state. They say that when Montgomery killed a woman named Bobby Jo Stinnett and kidnapped her unborn baby, she didn't really know what she was doing. And Montgomery's supporters say that on January 12th, when she's taken to Terre Haute Penitentiary in Indiana and cemented in U.S. history as the first woman the feds have executed since 1953, she will not have deserved to die.
What she did was horrendous. I am not discounting that. She did do a horrendous thing, but she did it in a mental break. I was raped. I got out. I went into a home that gave me love. I've always said that I'm bruised. I'm bruised because you can still kind of see the things that had happened to me as a child. But she was broken. And that's what I want people to see. She was a broken person. Broken.
Mattingly says that when she testified in court about her sister's home life, the prosecutors didn't ask about the sexual abuse. Montgomery's then lawyer, Fred Duchart, has in his career had more defendants end up on federal death row than any other living defense lawyer. And since 2008, Montgomery's been in Federal Medical Center Carswell in Fort Worth, Texas, waiting to die.
Her counsel failed her from start to finish. It started with the inexperienced male public defender. He didn't have the experience or skill to understand the level of trauma and mental illness that Lisa had experienced in her life. She needed a woman on her team who could establish a relationship of trust to get to the heart of what really happened to her in her life, which, if that had been given to a jury in a penalty phase, at least one juror would have returned a sentence of life without parole instead of death. And that's all it takes in the federal system. You just need one juror.
That's Kelly Henry, who picked up Montgomery's case back in 2012. She found that despite the severity of Montgomery's crime, it wasn't the only case of matricide and baby theft. But Montgomery's sentencing was an outlier.
There are 14 other cases of similar crimes, yet Lisa Montgomery is the only person facing execution. And that's because the prosecutors in those cases understand that those women have mental illness and a trauma history, and they took that into consideration when they assessed punishment in those cases.
In December 2012, Henry brought in South Carolina social worker Jan Vogelsang to assess the history and extent of Montgomery's abuse and see if it contributed to her crime. Vogelsang spent several long days face-to-face with Montgomery in early 2013 and might know her better than anyone else.
Lisa's abuse was as extreme as I've ever seen. I can't think in 40 years of private practice and 32 of death penalty work, I can't think of another case where I've had a client who was so extremely tortured. And I compare it to soldiers and to prisoners of war whom I've treated for trauma. I would put Lisa up there in terms of the trauma with those kinds of soldiers.
In March 2013, Vogelsang sent her 184-page report back to Henry, claiming that Montgomery suffers extreme psychological harm as a result of torture, sexual violation, and captivity. But she doesn't know if anyone at the Justice Department has read it.
It is almost impossible for me right now today to wrap my head around the fact this severely psychotic and mentally ill woman will be executed. It is just impossible for me to believe that as a country, as a society, we would take the life of someone that's mentally ill. Well, I do not think that someone in that state of mind should be held responsible for their acts.
In recent years, multiple states have made moves to ban the execution of severely mentally ill people. In December, the Ohio General Assembly gave final approval to legislation prohibiting executions of killers who have a serious mental illness, such as schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. Yet Governor Mike DeWine has yet to sign the bill into law. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court has repeatedly declined to save mentally ill people from the death penalty. And after 17 years without a federal execution, the Justice Department is in its final days on an execution spree. President Trump has already earned a grave historic achievement, killing the most prisoners in a single year since Grover Cleveland in the 1890s, and he's got 3 more state-sanctioned deaths remaining before the end of his term. President-elect Joe Biden has promised to end capital punishment at the federal level, but Inauguration Day will come too late for Montgomery.
President Trump, I am asking you, I am pleading with you to please reduce this to life. Lisa is a person that was brutalized over and over and over again in her childhood up into her adulthood. I'm asking you to take a few moments and to look at this and to realize that she was a broken person.